Good morning.
Good morning.
Please introduce yourself to the court and spell your last name for the record.
My name is Officer Francis Kimball. Kimball is spelled Kimbal.
Officer, where do you work?
I'm an officer at the Breckinridge County Police Department, where I specialize in the Financial Crimes Unit.
And what is the Financial Crimes Unit?
The FCU is a dedicated part of the police force that focuses on embezzlements, robbery, and fraud. I've worked over 200 cases.
Well, what education and what training do you have that qualifies you to work for the FCU?
After graduating at the top of my class from the police academy, I was then drafted into the Financial Crimes Unit.
Officer, how are you involved in today's case?
I received a call to investigate a series of thefts that had taken place at Rock World Amusement Park.
Well, we'll talk about your investigation here in a moment. But Officer, first, were you provided with sufficient facts and data to reach your conclusions in this case?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
Did you use reliable principles and methods?
Yes, I did.
Did you apply all of those principles and methods reliably to the facts of this case?
Absolutely.
Officer, you said that you were called to begin an investigation at the park. Why?
I received a phone call from J.C. Longstreet, the park's owner and CEO, to investigate a series of thefts that had happened at the ticket booth.
Could you please explain how admission to the park works through this ticket booth?
Yes, ma'am. There are two ways to get into Rock World. There's a general admission pass for $20. And there's
Objection, lack of foundation.
Counsel? Your Honor, this witness has completed an investigation at the park. A part of the information that he is discussing right now is what he reviewed to come to his conclusions in this case. So he has the proper knowledge to explain this here today.
Okay. Overruled, and you can proceed.
Officer Kimball, you were telling us about the admission systems at the park. How does that work?
Yes, ma'am. There's two ways to get into the park. There's a general admission pass for $20, and there's the VIP World Tour Pass for $35. Mr. Longstreet believed that there was some kind of money skimming operation going on within the wristband system.
Well, how did you begin your investigation into this matter?
I began by looking through the park's financial records from 2010 2013 and started comparing the numbers.
What other physical evidence did you review?
I began looking through the park, and I and some of the employees of the park noticed some wristbands that didn't match up to the park issue wristbands. They were cheap and tattered, and they missed the serial number that all the wristbands were supposed to contain.
Well, after you found this other type of wristband and you reviewed the financial data, what did you find?
I found that there was someone taking money off of the VIP World Tour Passes. They were replacing the World Tour Passes with frauds and pocketing the $15 difference from the general admission to the World Tour Pass and pocketing that money.
Was that consistent with the financial data that you reviewed at the park?
Yes, absolutely. The sales of the World Tour Passes were very low compared to previous years, even though there was an all-time high of World Tour ticket holders in the park itself.
Well, how low were the sales in 2012 compared to the previous years?
There was a 5% change between the general admission and the World Tour Pass.
How does a 5% change affect the revenue of the park, officer?
Quite significantly. A 5% change is equal to at least $67,000 in a one-year time period.
Well, after you found that the park had lost $67,000 over that summer, what did you do to continue your investigation?
When I realized what was going on in the ticket booth, I advised the park's owner to replace the ticket booth operator, Cameron Poole, with the park's accountant, Ms. Haley Floyd.
What day was that?
This was August 30th, 2012.
Well, Officer Kimball, what happened after J.C. Longstreet, the park's owner, removed Cameron Poole from the ticket booth?
August 30th is the same day that Cameron Poole, the operator, was fired from his job, and that is the same day that Cameron Poole returned to the park and robbed the ticket booth itself.
If it was Cameron Poole who robbed the ticket booth on August 30th, officer, what led you to arrest the defendant?
I discovered two key pieces of evidence that connected Whit Bowman to the events of August 30th.
Well, now I want to take those two pieces of evidence one at a time. What was the first thing that you found connecting the defendant to the events of August 30th?
The first piece of evidence was Whit Bowman's location before and immediately after the robberies of August 30th.
And would a map help you to better explain this?
Yes, ma'am, it would.
Your Honor, may the witness step down and make use of demonstrative evidence. Well, Officer Kimball, using this map, can you show us where the events of August 30th started?
Yes, ma'am. The robbery occurred at the main ticket booth. So the location of the robbery makes sense because this is where all the money from the park is kept from all the wristband sales. It's where Cameron Poole headed directly after the robbery that raised red flags about Whit Bowman's involvement.
Officer, where did Cameron Poole go?
As you can see, the ticket booth is at the front of the park. It would have been simple for him to simply flee out the main gate. Instead, he fled into the park to the only other exit in the Tunnel of Terror.
Well, when you investigated the events of August 30th, who was working the Tunnel of Terror at the time this robbery occurred?
I found that Whit Bowman was behind the controls of the Tunnel of Terror.
Now, based on your investigation, was Whit Bowman supposed to be behind the controls of the ride that day?
Absolutely not. Whit Bowman was assigned to the hamster wheel on the other side of the park.
Thank you, officer. You may retake your seat. Well, we talked about the location of the defendant as these events were happening. But what was the second piece of evidence that you found connecting to the defendant to the events of August 30th?
I found a cell phone that connected Whit Bowman and Cameron Poole having conversations before and after the robbery itself.
Well, where did you find this cell phone?
This was located at the Tunnel of Terror entrance, the ride that Whit Bowman was operating.
And when did you find the phone?
This was immediately after the robbery had taken place.
Well, what about that phone led you to believe that the defendant was involved?
There was conversations between Whit Bowman and Cameron Poole discussing the robbery and how to get into the park beforehand.
Well, would you recognize the text messages from the phone here in court today?
Yes, ma'am, I would.
Your Honor, permission to approach the witness with what has been previously marked was State's Exhibit 2 after showing opposing counsel. Officer, what did I just hand you?
This is the screenshot I took of Whit Bowman's phone.
And what name is at the top of that phone, officer?
It's S-Cam, who I believe to be Cameron Poole.
And does this appear to be a fair and accurate copy of the text messages that you reviewed on August 3rd?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, it's at this time that the state moves to admit into evidence a State's Exhibit 2, a screenshot of the text messages from that night.
Any objection from the defense?
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay, admitted.
Officer Kimball, you said that there were text messages sent to Whit Bowman right after this robbery occurred. What was said to Whit Bowman?
At 8:19, immediately after the robbery, there's a text message that said, "I'm out, talk to you later, thanks."
Officer Kimball, after you reviewed the text messages, what did you do?
I placed the defendant Whit Bowman under arrest.
Well, after conducting your investigation in this case, were you able to reach a conclusion, officer?
Yes, I was.
What was that conclusion?
I concluded that Whit Bowman was not working the Tunnel of Terror by mistake. Instead, the events of August 30th were planned well in advance.
Thank you, officer. Your Honor, it's at this time that I have nothing further. Permission to approach the witness.